Steve Yabsley Show on your local radio station. We welcome in the studio my lovely guest of the day, Tom Williams. Hello, Tom.
Hello, Steve.
Thank you very much for coming in. Now, Tom is Artistic Director of the Clifton International Festival of Music, and he's also the Director and conductor with Bristol and Bath's Erebus Ensemble, who are performing as part of the festival. And to get you in the mood, I'll just play a little clip of one of their pieces of music. This is something written by John Shepherd. If you could introduce it, Tom.
It's Libera Nos.
Isn't that lovely and relaxing? I don't. This is a criticism, Tom, but that's the sort of thing I would like to get massaged to.
Absolutely, yeah. It's very relaxing stuff.
Absolutely beautiful that was. Well, let's talk a little bit about you first of all before we talk about the various things that you're involved with. What about your childhood? Because you've been in this area about 8 years, but where were you brought up?
South Wales, near Port Talbot.
Okay. Into a musical family?
Well, into a family that listened to a lot of music. My granddad was pretty obsessed with opera, so it was always on and around me. There was no formal training when I was young, though. It sort of started when I got to secondary school, really.
Yeah. Was there a moment when you felt touched by some particular piece of music and thought that it was what you wanted to do with your life?
Yeah, there was, actually. It sounds a bit corny, but I actually went to see a group called The 16, which happened to be headlining this year's festival in Llandaff Cathedral in Cardiff, and I heard 3 or 4 pieces there that really sort of shook me quite a lot and thought I'd quite like to look at this a bit more, and did, and now I seem to be managing to make a career out of it. Now,
there is this strange division between those that like pop music, popular music, and those that like classical. Not that you can't enjoy both, but I know many people say I'm a pop music person and vice versa. You embrace both, presumably.
Absolutely. I think that's complete nonsense. I mean, I was always taught that there are 2 types of music, good music and bad music, and the genre that it happens to be doesn't really matter. I love a lot of pop stuff, and but obviously do some quite heavy sacred church music as well.
So yeah, but you get people who say that they don't like classical music, which is absurd because the range is vast.
It's absolutely huge. Yeah.
And it does go from the very, very tuneful, Strauss or whatever, so it's got a real bit of rhythm and oomph to it and a nice melody, to the more avant-garde side, which probably people are put off by sometimes.
Yeah, there's some really wild and wacky stuff. But yeah, and then you get Mozart, of course, which is, very beautiful and reasonably plain, I guess, compared to some of the harmonic stuff that happens these days with modern composers. But there's a huge variety, and I mean, it's really something that we as performers try to break down constantly, this idea that there's a barrier, that it's not for some people. It's complete nonsense. It's absolutely for everyone, and it's pretty accessible stuff if you give it a try.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that the right piece of classical music can affect people overwhelmingly, can't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it has a huge effect. I mean, it can make you incredibly sad, incredibly happy. I mean, it really goes through the emotional spectrum.
Well, many people remember Luciano Pavarotti singing the opera piece for the World Cup, maybe 15 years ago.
Ensemble,
exactly, but that was just so appropriate for that World Cup.
Exactly.
And it stirred emotions in people. There were grown men crying.
It is. It's an incredibly moving piece, and this is the thing that I try and say to people when they say, I don't like opera, but I love Nessun Dorma. It's actually from an opera by Puccini. Now, people wouldn't bother to go and see the opera by Puccini, but they happily whack that on the player. So it's important to give these things a real good try, I think.
Yeah, opera's a funny one, isn't it? Because it does often feature most exquisite pieces of music, but then in some people's eyes, and mine sometimes, it's a rather daft art form in that you've got people dressing up, often in costumes that seem inappropriate for their figure or for their style, and there's sort of the linking music, which is sometimes a little bit drawn out.
Some of them don't half go on. I mean.
Yeah, I know, but they've got these gems hidden amongst them, haven't they?
They have, yeah, absolutely. No, that some operas go on for, literally days. But no, within them there are some real.
Yeah, and also
highlights.
You've got the price aspect. I know opera isn't your forte, but nonetheless, some of the operas can be very, very expensive, can't they? And that can put people off.
Well, they can. I mean, in London, if you want a top band ticket in Covent Garden, yeah, you're looking at 3 figures at least. But of course, there are lots of accessible groups that perform around the country. We're very lucky in Bristol. We get the Welsh National Opera Company come over twice a year, and actually, if you're a student, you can get a half-price ticket in the Gods for £3.75.
Oh, that's valid.
You can't get a pint for that these days, can you? So that's it's really quite cheap.
How did your contemporaries feel? I mean, your schoolmates, as you started to get into this sort of music?
I don't know, really.
Have you still got them as friends?
Yeah, I think so. They're very supportive and respectful of it. But I think they find it a little odd, probably.
Yeah. Did you take up an instrument?
Very early on, I played the trombone, but I don't touch the thing now. It's I'm not particularly good at it.
So it's principally your voice that you work with?
Yeah. And more conducting these days. But yeah, I sang at Bristol Cathedral for quite a number of years.
So when you decided to take it a bit more seriously, what did you do? Where did you go and learn your trade, as it were?
Well, I had lessons at school and at college, singing lessons, went through the grades. Then I got to university and I got into conducting, essentially, because no one else wanted to do it. And we lost our conductor one year, and someone said, "Oh, go on, wave your arms around. How hard can it be?" So I gave it a go, and so I'm doing more of that these days, really.
Let's have a brief word about the conductor, because although they can be wonderful centre point to a concert, very flamboyant, there have been many names over the years that people remember who are great in front of an orchestra or a bunch of musicians. They do sometimes get criticised for their job. People say, anyone can do that. Why can't they just do it without them? Two different views. I mean, what do you say to the critics of conductors?
Well, I think often they've got a point. And a lot of the music I do is very performable without a director directing it on the spot. And in fact, there are a lot of groups now who do this music unconducted. I think it helps. I mean, it certainly helps in our group. It's a good dynamic. It's a real conversation between me and the singers. I don't run it as a dictatorship at all. It's very open, but sometimes you do need an arbiter that sort of says, well, we're not quite agreed on this musical point, so I'm afraid I'm having the final vote.
Yeah, but that's sort of prior to performance in rehearsal, really, though. I mean, when you've got, I presume you haven't conducted a large orchestra, of many, many dozens of players, but when you have a conductor in that capacity, what is their role during a live concert? Because presumably if the musicians are just reading the music off the sheet, why do they need a conductor?
Well, I mean, he's often interpreting on the spot. I mean, this stuff, this music isn't, otherwise we just get machines to do it. I mean, the whole point is that it is a live act. And the conductor is really someone who interprets the score as he's going along.
By interpreting, you mean timing then, do you?
Yeah, it can be anything. Timing, volume, dynamics, tempo. Because we have tempo markings, of course. Allegro means quick. But what's that mean? What's quick? One man's quick is another man's medium pace, to use a cricketing analogy. But I think, it's essentially, it's that guy who makes the decision and has that relationship with the group in front of him, whether it's an early music group or a huge orchestra. And you develop it on the spot, and it really becomes a conversation that makes a performance of a piece unique.
How is it for you? I mean, is it quite an intense experience?
It can be very intense, yeah. It depends on the music. I mean, as a conductor, sometimes you perform music that you don't actually particularly like all that much.
You have to concentrate there, don't you? I mean,
yeah, it's pretty intense stuff, and you can get a bit swept away. You've got to try and remember you're doing a job and keep it together. But yeah, you can completely get swept away with it sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I like to see, a conductor who really loses him or herself in the music. And, some of them revel in the celebrity of it as well, don't they?
Yeah, it's a big show. It is a big part of it, actually. And, people want to come, and just to mention the 16 again, who are coming for the last night of the festival. I mean, one of their big draws is Harry Christophers, their director, who has, fantastic hair and an excellent dinner suit.
Well, that makes an evening.
He's a show in himself. It's fantastic to watch.
Yeah, this is what's nice about classical music. You often get the characters, don't you? I've noticed that some of the first violinists in orchestras can be singular characters as well. Because they're important to the overall sound, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah. And you can be on a back desk in an orchestra. You could be miles away from the conductor, really. And yeah, you've just got to plod on and do your thing and try and feel part of the experience and feel that bond with the other musicians. I
went to a classical concert a couple of months ago with a big orchestra, and the two characters that caught my eye one was a trombonist who didn't play anything for the first hour of the performance. I just sat there and then joined in a lot for the latter. And then the percussionist, in fact there were 3 percussionists in the concert I saw, who were going like the clappers throughout, moving from one instrument to the other, never able to relax.
No, not at all. I mean, as a former brass player, you really do have to count like mad, because you can be literally 20-25 minutes without anything to do. and then you have to come clattering in with some huge fanfare.
Yeah, if you get it
you
wrong,
miss the opportunity, then that's it. You've got to wait another 20 minutes.
Yeah, and I tell you what, the old triangle cuts through, doesn't it? You've got a tinkle on it.
It's only small, but it can be heard.
Now, I know you also lecture on music, don't you? Do you enjoy doing that?
A little bit, yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's great. It's something that's quite new. I've only recently started doing that, but it's quite fun. I do a lot of adult learning classes and things, which is great because there's so much enthusiasm. But the thing that I'm trying to do, as again, lots of performers are trying to do, is to get the younger people involved, because most of the people who come to the lectures and to the concerts are sort of the other side of 70, shall we say.
Well, this brings us to Erebus, who are an ensemble that you've been involved with for a couple of years. Tell me about the origin of it.
Well, we set up in October 2012, and I used to run a group in Bristol, and, well, essentially we decided to rebrand a bit. And I got to know a few singers from London and other parts of the UK who were quite keen to stay together after a youth initiative that they'd been involved in. So we took it from there, really, and we did a recording in October 2012, which we recorded in Henleys. And it's gone from there. So the concert profile is getting busier.
And you focus, not exclusively, but you focus on sacred music of the 16th and 17th century. Why?
It was sort of the thing that I enjoyed most academically when I did my music degree. And I did a lot of writing about that period of music. So it seemed sensible at the time to get a group together to actually perform some of it, which again helped with the lecturing and the research and that stuff. So that was really my initial interest in setting the group up.
And how do you choose new pieces to perform? Because presumably you're talking about music that was composed all throughout Europe during this period. So where do you research new pieces?
Well, they still come about. I mean, people still perform music, for the first time that was written in 1550 or whatever. There's a lot of stuff that's still undiscovered.
Isn't that nice, though?
It's amazing, yeah. Of course, a lot of it's not very good. I mean, let's be honest, the stuff that is superb is now firmly in the back catalogue. So, but you do find the odd gem among it. There are some very staple, famous pieces of this period. The Allegri Miserere is one that's been used, I think, on about 10 or 12 different adverts. So that you'll have ones like that are sort of almost recognisable to maybe someone who doesn't go to this type of music, these type of concerts. But yeah, there are occasional gems of that are relatively unknown, really.
And what makes you unusual is that you're performing this archaic, but in a good way, music, and yet the group has quite a young profile, doesn't it?
Very young, yeah. I'm by far and away at 28 the oldest, so which is nice, which is really good. They're all in their early 20s, and there's a real bug for this repertoire now.
And you've had some success. You had second place in London at the International A Cappella Choir Competition. You were just pipped to it by an outfit that had been around a lot longer, I think.
Yeah, well, in fact, I later found out that they were essentially the National Choir of Spain, so we didn't feel too downbeat about coming second to them. But yeah, it was a great experience. We did some wonderful music at St John Smith Square Concert Hall in London. It was a really, really great week.
Well, you're performing as part of the Clifton International Music Festival. You're going to be with the jazz saxophonist Andy Williamson at Clifton Cathedral on Tuesday the 10th at 7:30. I was looking at a clip of Andy Williamson online, and he was abseiling down the side of an office block whilst playing the saxophone. So he's a bit different, isn't he?
He's a little bit different, Andy, yeah. He loves that kind of stuff. He's a great guy to work with because he's always thinking constantly about how we can improve the ways people receive classical music, and he's always putting a new spin on it, so he's really fun.
And the concert is described as a mashup between 15th century monastery and Ronnie Scott's.
Yeah, that's probably a fair assessment.
Is Andy going to be with you throughout, or just on some of the pieces?
On some. We will do a couple of these items just in their sort of true form, if you like. And Andy and his team are going to improvise, I think Andy's actually writing a few pieces that are sort of based on 15th and 16th century music, but completely for a jazz group. And then we'll come together for some as well, and he'll sort of improvise over the top of some of our stuff. So, I mean, who knows? It may not work, but come and find out.
Well, it's a lovely venue, I must say. You're at Clifton Cathedral, which has got wonderful acoustics. And the festival itself, it's the second year. I think you're director this year, aren't you?
Of the festival, yeah.
Just tell us in broad terms what it encompasses.
This year, well, we've got a huge variety, actually. There's a lot of choral music. We start off on this Friday, actually, Friday the 6th, with a group called called Sinfonia Sacre. They're a student group based in Bristol, a very fine choir. So there's a bit of choral music there. There's choral music with us, the Erebus Ensemble, on the 10th of June. And of course that last one on the 14th with the 16 is the real sort of big choral headliner of the week.
And there's some interesting stuff. It's quite a diverse programme. You've got a violin sonata written in a tent in Gallipoli.
Well, that's the great thing. This year we've really tried to broaden out. Last year it was very chorally based, the festival, but this year we've tried to broaden a bit and get a bit more orchestral music. And that's going to be a real highlight. Rupert Marshall-Luck and Matthew Rickard are performing this piece by Frederick Kelly, who was an Australian soldier who died in the First World War. And we don't think he ever heard the piece himself. It's been performed in Australia and other parts of the Southern Hemisphere, but this is the first time it's ever been done in the UK. And that's on Friday the 13th, so that should be a really great one.
That couldn't be more appropriate with the anniversary that we're all marking at the moment. There are several pre-concert talks, aren't there, I notice, and also there are separate talks. There's a look at acoustics, Richard Strauss, and allegory in Renaissance music, and all those talks are free, aren't they?
They're all free, yeah. We've got lots of stuff. We've done our utmost to keep prices as low as we can, and all the talks are free, whether it's the pre-concert talk all the three sort of lectures that are happening throughout the week. That's all free. And there's a Come and Sing workshop, which isn't free, but is going to be a really fantastic opportunity for sort of local amateur singers to get involved and work with some members of Clifton and Bristol Cathedral choirs and have their little go as well.
Well, if you want more details, there is a website. It's www.cliftonfestival.com, and Erebus are performing as part of the festival on Tuesday the 10th. That's a week today at Clifton Cathedral at 7:30. That's on Pembroke Road, together with the saxophonist Andy Williamson. And I see, looking ahead to the future, you've got other events. You're involved with the Bristol Proms. You're playing a series of concerts, including, intriguingly, Bach in the Dark.
Yes, that would be very interesting. We had a go at this last year. We had an In the Dark concert where we featured some Gesualdo, who's a 17th century Italian composer. This year we're going a little bit more modern, right up to the Baroque with Bach. We'll see what happens.
How dark is it?
It can get very dark. Last year we had various levels of lighting, from sort of candlelight to low spotlights to absolute pitch black. So the plan is to try the same again.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's a little bit further off. That's in July. But the festival itself kicks off this Friday, runs through to Saturday the 14th. As I say, details of all the concerts and the talks at www.cliftonfestival.com. Thanks for coming in today.
Cheers, Steve. Thank you.
That's Tom Williams, who's the director of the Clifton International Music Festival and the director and conductor with Bristol and Bath's Erebus Ensemble. Let's just hear one more clip of the ensemble. Wasn't that lovely? That was the Erebus Ensemble. Tom Williams there conducting, and once again you can see them at Clifton Cathedral on Tuesday the 10th as part of the Clifton International Music Festival. And thanks to Tom for coming and telling us about it.